Hello, I'm Jennifer Cerventi from the NEH Office of Digital Humanities. I'm pleased to present some information today on NEH's Institutes for Advanced Topics in the Digital Humanities program. This webinar is specifically intended for those interested in potentially applying to direct one of these opportunities. This webinar will cover the February 2025 deadline. In this webinar, I'll give an overview of the program, including a discussion of the program's mission and important dates, and eligibility. I will then provide some information about planning and writing your application, while discussing the program's review criteria and sharing some tips and reminders. I will then outline the NEH's review process and share some additional resources and contact information. Starting with the NEH resource page on the NEH website, you can find more specific information about this particular program under the About the Program section. NEH's Office of Digital Humanities has offered this program since 2008. The Institutes for Advanced Topics in the Digital Humanities, or Institutes for Advanced Topics as I'll be referring to them during the webinar, support national or regional, meaning multi-state, training programs for scholars, humanities professionals, advanced graduate students to broaden and extend their knowledge of the digital humanities broadly conceived. Another way to think about this program is it is focused on funding regional or national continuing education opportunities in some aspect of the digital humanities. Scrolling further down that program resource page, you'll find specific information about what's new for 2025. But the short answer is actually not much. You'll see that we've added an introductory, one-paragraph nature of the request section in attachment 2 of the narrative to help peer reviewers focus on what's being proposed. We've also clarified our expectations for how the project can be reviewed by evaluators. We provide additional guidance in the impact and evaluation section of the attachment 2. And for repeat directors, we've provided additional information about what you need to include in attachment 6 for the evaluations. And finally, we have added a required attachment 7, data management and sharing plan to the application materials, and have provided instructions about that in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So let's talk about that Notice of Funding Opportunity. It is the most important document for this application process. It lists deadlines and the required materials for a complete application package. Make note of these requirements, such as the page length and size, and whether something is required or conditionally required. It details what we can and cannot fund. So start by downloading and reading the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which is actually formally known as the Application Guidelines. This document is also known as the NOFO. So when I refer to the NOFO throughout this recording, that's what I mean too. But please carefully read, highlight, underline this document. It's your guide to preparing an application. It really is in your best interest to follow the instructions, so identify all of the required components and the attachments in the package now. Your application will not be considered eligible for review if it's late or if you don't satisfy all of the requirements as described in the NOFO. We have also prepared a frequently asked questions document for this program. Follow the link under Step 1 Review under the Application Instructions section of the program resource page, and read this document too. But let's go back to the NOFO. Once you open the PDF document, this is what you'll see. It's a long document with lots of details, but I'm going to call your attention to some sections that are really key. But at this stage, it's also a good idea, if you're thinking of applying to this program, to contact your institutional grants administrator in your Office of Sponsored Research or Sponsored Programs or Development Office, whoever at your institution is responsible for external funding, particularly federal funding. They will go to grants.gov and download the entire package, including any required forms. And they are responsible for submitting this application on your behalf, and really behalf of the institution, via the grants.gov portal. Some institutions, particularly larger ones, require long lead times for submission of applications for federal awards, with multiple levels of review, internal review and sign-off. You always want to start these conversations early. Let's talk about eligibility, though. The Institutes for Advanced Topics program makes awards to institutions rather than individuals. Awardee institutions must be in the United States or one of its jurisdictions and be a nonprofit organization recognized as tax-exempt under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, or it must be an accredited institution of higher education, either public or nonprofit, or a state or local government or one of their agencies, or a federally recognized Native American tribal government. An individual may serve as a project director or co-project director on only one Institutes for Advanced Topics application per deadline, and you may not submit identical applications or applications with significant overlap to multiple NEH programs at the same time. Keep in mind, though, that Institute faculty can appear in more than one proposed application to this program. The program description section of the NOFO provides additional details about the mission and goals of this program. And the possible topics for the professional development offering that can be supported by this funding opportunity are vast. We've listed some possible ones, but these are just possibilities. We want you to identify a coherent, exciting, and creative topic appropriate for this program. We want applicants to combine significant humanities questions and topics with challenging digital methods and approaches and propose a training or professional development opportunity for your intended audience. And we also want you to offer it in the most appropriate format for that target audience. And it can be online, in person, or some combination or hybrid. For those of you who have considered this program in the past and have seen previous NOFOs, you'll notice that we now have a program outputs and outcomes section. It's a new subsection of the program description. In fact, you'll start seeing this section in all of NEH's notices of funding opportunities going forward. But it just reinforces the intent of this program, which is to provide training to build cadres or cohorts of humanities scholars and professionals with knowledge of specific humanities digital methods, tools, and platforms. It is also important to see what we do not fund. It is detailed in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, but I'll mention a few highlights. In particular, this program does not fund recurring and established conferences and professional meetings. We also do not fund projects that fall outside of the humanities. We are the National Endowment for the Humanities. And with all NEH awards, we do not support the promotion of a particular political, religious, or ideological point of view. We also do not support advocacy for social or political action or lobbying. You might also be aware of and explore the Institute's program from the Division of Education Programs and the Education and Training Program from the Division of Preservation and Access. These are two other funding opportunities from the NEH that support continuing and professional development opportunities. After reviewing those programs on the NEH website, if you're not sure which program is most appropriate, please do not hesitate to get in touch with the NEH staff to determine the best fit. The maximum amount available per award in this program, the Institutes for Advanced Topics, is $250,000 in outright funds, and that's inclusive of both direct and indirect costs. So keep that number in mind as you consider the scope of your activities. Cost sharing is not required for this program. And you certainly don't have to ask for the maximum amount. Particularly if this offering would be your first, consider starting small-ish to establish a track record of success for future work. Awards can also be for up to 3 years, but don't have to be. Do, though, give yourself and your team enough time in the period of performance for all of the activities that need to happen before, during, and after the actual training offering. I also want to mention an exciting opportunity to work with the National Library of Medicine of the National Institutes of Health. This federal institution has wonderful digital collections and knowledgeable staff, and they are interested in helping humanities scholars using digital methods explore these collections in new and innovative ways. So if you think that your proposed Institute for Advanced Topics might benefit from access to these collections, along with expertise from their staff, please get in touch with Jeffrey Resnick from the National Library of Medicine using the email in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. I I also want to call your attention to the language in the Notice of Funding Opportunity about this program's participation in the NEH-wide Humanities Perspectives on Artificial Intelligence. The Institutes for Advanced Topics in the Digital Humanities is one of the designated programs under this initiative. We are interested in supporting continuing or professional development opportunities that help participants seek to understand various aspects of artificial intelligence, really how this technology works, and then address the ethical, legal, and societal implications of AI. So if you and your colleagues, including those outside of your institution, are experts in this area and want to share that knowledge and know-how with others in a regional or national setting, consider applying to this program. A reminder of some key upcoming dates. The next deadline for 2025 is February 13th, and applications must be received by 11:59 Eastern Time through the grants.gov portal. I know that you all are living and working in different time zones, but for the purposes of submission, these applications need to be in before midnight U.S. Eastern Time, February 13th. The Office of Digital Humanities staff is also happy to read drafts. We have some guidance in the Notice of Funding Opportunities about the steps for submitting drafts, but keep in mind they don't have to be perfect. They are just drafts. Send us what you have, and send them to odh@nih.gov. Since this program just has one deadline, we just have one draft deadline as well, and we must receive them by December 12th, 2024 for the February 2025 deadline. And even if you're not able to or do not want to submit a draft for review, please do not hesitate to contact us. We are always able to schedule a time for a conversation. We can discuss possible ideas, we can answer any questions. We are here to help. But let's turn back to that Notice of Funding Opportunity, and in particular the sections on preparing the various required application attachments. But before you begin writing, remember to review the review criteria. Ensure that your materials specifically address the review criteria. And I promise we'll also return to these review criteria a little bit later in this webinar. So, the Institutes for Advanced Topics in the Digital Humanities has a number of required and conditionally required components detailed in this handy-dandy application component table. You can also use this table as a checklist as you're preparing the different sections of your application. This table tells you whether a particular section is required or conditionally required and specifies any page or paragraph limits. Pay attention to these limits, please. Any longer and the application will be declared ineligible or non-responsive, and no one wants that. Be particularly mindful of the words should and must in the NOFO. Musts are required, shoulds are suggestions. As we start to look at the required components, attachment 2 is the narrative. It's your heart of the application. And the first section of the narrative is new this year. It's that one-page nature of the request that I mentioned earlier. This paragraph will help it will help panelists understand right at the beginning of the proposal what is it that you're proposing and for whom. The second component of the narrative is the intellectual significance of the proposed institute. You are applying to the National Endowment for the Humanities, so it should not be a surprise to you that we ask you to make the case for the humanities significance. Set the stage for why this Institute for Advanced Topics at this time. It's okay if you are proposing an offering for a particular group of humanities scholars or professionals focused in a certain area. You certainly don't have to promise an Institute for Advanced Topics that will appeal to everyone. Understanding who the target audience is early in the proposal helps the peer reviewers understand how the proposed institute structure and curriculum will meet that audience's needs. The next section of the narrative is the curriculum and work plan. Now that you've made the case for the topic, demonstrate to the reviewers that you've identified an effective structure and curriculum for effectively addressing that topic. Why is this topic being delivered this way? Describe what will happen before, during, and after the offering. Provide information about the specific topics, themes, methodologies, approaches, and/or tools that will be considered during the Institute. Demonstrate that you have enough time allocated for each of the topics to be considered. Have you proposed an appropriate mix of readings and discussions combined with hands-on activities? Are there times for participants to work alone or in groups to try out what they've learned? Don't overwhelm the participants with such a huge menu of highly technical topics that they will become frustrated. Be thoughtful of how the schedule flows from one topic or activity to another. In the participants section of the narrative, you want to reinforce your arguments for your intended audience that you made previously in the significance section, but this is your opportunity to provide additional details. Describe how you will target your publicity to reach this audience. If you want to particularly ensure that a previously underserved audience, say community college faculty, learn about this opportunity, how will you reach them? Be specific. Which media and outreach channels are you proposing to target? Remember that participants must be drawn from a national or regional cohort, meaning a multi-state pool. This is not the right program for a professional development opportunity that's limited to a single state or institution. Also, don't forget to describe how the institute will be accessible to persons with disabilities. And then how will your leadership team manage the application process? What's your process for selecting participants? And a brief word for any directors of previous institutes for advanced topics that may be tuning into this webinar. You have additional requirements to address in this section. And don't forget to attach the final evaluations from all of your participants from your previous offerings in Attachment 6. On to the institutional profile section of the narrative. In this section, you'll be able to make the case for the host institution or institutions. So why this topic now for these participants at this institution? What specific facilities can you offer? Will participants be provided special access to technology labs or special collections appropriate for the Institute topic? Where will the Institute for Advanced Topics meet? In the library's Digital Scholarship Center? In a classroom? If your proposed offering includes a residential component, provide information about your various housing accommodations that will be made available to the participants. Remember, the individual needs of participants can vary widely, so consider how you might allow for a variety of options. In the faculty, staff, and consultants section, this is your space to convince the peer reviewers that you have assembled the right team members and visiting faculty to provide a deep, rich, and thoughtful experience in the digital humanities for the participants. Describe that staff, faculty, and consultants' roles and their responsibility, and make sure that those same folks appear in Attachment 3, the Work Plan and Course Outline section. It is very appropriate as well to include a project coordinator in addition to the project directors as a member of the project team. That person helps to ensure that the logistics for the Institute for Advanced Topics are well executed. These Institutes for Advanced Topics are opportunities for the participants to meet and work with leaders in a particular area of the digital humanities. So assemble your team thoughtfully and get letters of commitment. And remember, visiting faculty members may come from outside of the United States. And don't forget to include biographies and those letters of commitment for the project team and visiting faculty in Attachments 4 and 5 of the application package. The final section of the narrative is about the impact and evaluation of the proposed professional development opportunity. A hallmark of this program is its long tail. How will the community that was developed during this particular Institute for Advanced Topic be sustained? Are there plans for conference panels or the development of open educational resources or special issues of journals? Are you making available captioned videos of any keynote addresses or lectures that happened during the Institute? We've also tried to provide additional suggestions as to what to include in this section about you, the project director's evaluation strategy, before, during, and after what takes place, including the use of qualitative and quantitative measures, and how it will involve the participants and participating organizations. And finally, don't forget to describe how scholars and professionals who are not able to participate still might benefit from any materials produced for and by the Institutes for Advanced Topics. These opportunities are funded by U.S. tax dollars, so we want the widest possible primary and secondary audiences to benefit. In Attachment 3, the Work Plan and Course Outline, you have about 5 pages to provide additional details, along with a schedule of readings and activities. Help the reviewers envision the proposed experience for the participants. Be sure that it is clear who on the team is doing what when. Everyone in your attachment 1, the list of project personnel, should also appear somewhere in this attachment. The sample narratives that we have in the Program Resources section on the landing page also have some excellent examples of how various successful applicants have addressed this requirement. For those returning directors, Attachment 6 is also where you include the final evaluations from your previous offering. You don't need to include any formative evaluation that occurred, say, daily of the previous offering. And in fact, you want to avoid overwhelming the reviewers of your current application. Rather, help them understand what worked and what didn't work in your previous offering and any responses that you may have in this new application to those participant evaluations. And as I mentioned, we now also require a separate attachment, Attachment 7, for a data management and sharing plan. Don't forget it. It's not optional. We have provided some guidance on how to think about data management for this particular type of project. And now, a few words about the budget and budget justification. Many pages in the Notice of Funding Opportunity are devoted to instructions for preparing the budget. But keep in mind that panelists are looking to ensure that the proposed budget is reasonable in relation to the proposed activities and the anticipated results. Remember that the maximum amount that you can request for this program is $250,000 in outright funds, although many projects request much less. And the project must correspond to the work plan in the narrative section, as well as any accompanying appendices. The peer reviewers will be looking at the budget, and they will be asking, does this budget align with the project's overarching goals and specific planned activities? Are there adequate resources allocated for project staff relative to the accompanying tasks? Is the method for compensating the participants clear? Are they slated to receive an honorarium to defer costs, or will you be providing a per diem and travel expenses? Both are permissible. Just be clear in your method of calculation. Use that budget justification to discuss any institutional policies regarding compensation rates, or even sort of allowable time for the project directors. We recognize that each institution has their own way of working, and that is often invisible for reviewers, so make it visible in your budget justification. This is also an excellent opportunity to work closely with your Office of Sponsored Research or Accounting Office colleagues to ensure that everyone is on the same page. And finally, be sure to use the correct indirect cost rate and apply it to the correct funding categories when calculating the budget. It can be rather technical, but your colleagues in your offices of sponsored research or programs will be able to help you. Earlier in the webinar, I recommended that you look at the review criteria as you begin to prepare the narrative. Remember, these are the review criteria, and only these review criteria that the peer panelists will use to evaluate your applications. So, turning to the program's 5 review criteria that are on pages 28 and 29 of the NOFO. I'll go through all of these briefly, noting that each of them has a number of sub-criteria that you'll want to address in your application materials too. We have keyed the review criteria to sections of the application, so before you submit the final application package, be sure to compare these criteria to that application to ensure that you've addressed them completely. Review criteria 1 is intellectual significance and potential impact. Because no matter how cool the proposed topic is, if you have not clearly made the case for the intellectual significance of the proposed professional development offering in the humanities and don't have a clear sense of who your audience is, we can't fund it. Review criterion 2, conception, definition, organization, and description of the program. This is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. If you have a fantastic idea for a professional development offering in the digital humanities, but haven't nailed down the details, panelists will not be inclined to recommend your proposal for funding. They want to have confidence that what you are proposing can actually happen. Review criterion 3, participant selection. Once again, panelists will be looking for details in your narrative to give them confidence that you have carefully thought about the audience for this proposed offering and have a clear idea about how to publicize it to that audience and select them for the Institute. Number 4 is the appropriateness of the Institute team and the host institution. This review criteria addresses the why you and your team and why the applicant institution. And the final review criterion is criterion 5, impact, evaluation, and budget. It is in your interest to make sure that budget and budget justification align with the goals outlined in the narrative and related attachments. It's also where we ask if you've set aside adequate resources for the team members commensurate with their contributions to the project. This is the criteria also where panels will address whether or not your evaluation plan and the data management sharing plans are adequate and well detailed. So let's talk a little bit about what happens once you submit that application. The review process for the Institutes for Advanced Topics follows a similar timeline as most of the other NEH grant programs. The process starts when an applicant begins preparing a proposal and then submits it via grants.gov by the program deadline. Once NEH staff have ensured that that applications are eligible, complete, and compliant, we assign them to panels and assemble a peer review panel, typically of 4 to 5 members. After the panel, NEH staff identify which proposals will be recommended for funding based on peer review input and the amount of funding available. All of the recommended applications across NEH then go to the NEH National Council on the Humanities, which meets 3 times a year, typically in March, July, and November. And then after the NEH Council meeting, the NEH chair, and only the NEH chair, makes the final funding decisions. The final step for NEH staff is to notify the applicants as to whether or not their applications will be funded. This program will be presented at the July 2025 Council meeting. So, as we conclude this webinar, a few final reminders. Start now. Start pulling together the proposed curriculum. Get those letters of commitment from your visiting faculty members. Start to map out the budget. In terms of additional resources, I want to remind you about the importance of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, about the Frequently Asked Questions document. Review the sample applications from successful applicants, keeping in mind that application requirements have changed, so be sure to follow our current instructions. You'll also want to look at lists of current offerings and follow the links to the NEH database of funded projects to see what we have funded over the 16 years of the program. You'll want your application to be clear and concise. Be sure that someone not familiar with your proposed offering can figure out what it is that you want to do in the first paragraph. Given that the peer review panel will likely be composed of some humanities scholars in your field, but also some outside of your field, as well as computer and information scientists, librarians, archivists, and other humanities professionals. So write for a broad yet educated audience. As mentioned previously, we always encourage potential applicants to work closely with your Office of Sponsored Research or the equivalent office, as the person serving as the Institutional Grants Administrator will be providing a lot of key information on the application forms and will actually submit the application via grants.gov. As we talked about, budgets for institutes for advanced topics can be quite complicated, often with funds for visiting faculty members, for participants, and sometimes for partner institutions that are serving as subrecipients. Your colleagues in your Office of Sponsored Research can help you prepare the budget correctly using the correct indirect cost rate. They are professionals and they want to help you. And speaking of help, you can always reach out to a program officer in the Office of Digital Humanities. The contact information for the Office of Digital Humanities is shown here, odh@nih.gov. Staff in the Office of Digital Humanities, and frankly elsewhere at the NEH, we are always happy to assist you. That's our job. Please reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Email us. Get in touch with us. Talk with us. And if not this year, put a pin in this for a future deadline. I want to thank you for your time today. Good luck with writing your applications, and we actually hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.